All right, here, let's slide you. Can you slide up a little bit? Just because that's at the edge of the table. Here, keep coming. Slide right up to it. Get close, get close, get close, get close. There we go. Nice. Okay, so let me go over here. And we're going to go to your part of the family tree. And let's look at you right here. So that's you. Is there anything you like have thoughts about that maybe you omitted before, or stuff you want to talk about offhand? I can scale it down if you want to move it.
Where did you get that?
What about your folks? The what?
Where did you get that?
The name?
Akiko, yeah. I don't ever remember
I think
that.
it was in a document somewhere.
Really?
I'm not sure. If I look at her profile, it's someplace she could have been referred to as that. Let's see. That's kind of like a timeline. If you look at it gives you like documents and things like that. Anyways,
Anyway,
so what, 1920 census. So, I mean, there's like subsequent censuses
yeah,
and things like that, and it may have referred to her at some
Yeah.
point as that,
okay. Well,
but
I don't ever remember or recall that, but that's okay.
tell me about, well, what do you remember about your mom? Was she, I mean, what do you remember really early? Were you guys you were in Lincoln, right? Or in Scottsbluff?
In that area all the time, yeah. That's where we all grew up.
What is your first memory what do you remember? The first thing when you were youngest?
We were all farmers. That's all I remember. And I know everybody worked on the farm, including Mom. All the kids had to work as they grow up. We moved depending on where we lived. We lived in various places in that area around Scottsbluff, Mediterranean, west of Scottsbluff. We lived several places around there at the time.
And so you would, do you think you lived close to where you were working on farms? I mean, based on that?
Oh,
or
we
was
lived
it-
on the farm,
You lived
yeah.
actually on the farm.
Right. Yeah.
And what were they growing in general?
When we were farming, we were tenants at some point, but before that we were farming when the kids were growing up, raised just like everybody else. Sugar beets, beans, potatoes, corn, that kind of thing.
Right. And so was the composition of was it, you had a pretty sizable family. Was there like, was Mary taking care of you or Chuck, or how did that
Oh, no.
how did that break down? Or were they working on the farm and your mom took care of you?
I don't, when I was I think the kids were all working too, like hoeing, uh, bees, for weeds. And so everybody was working, except I don't remember when we were that small. Obviously, Mom must have stayed at home at that point, but I don't really remember anything like that. All I remember is after the kids were old enough to be kind of able to take care of themselves, we probably were in the fields with everybody else who was working.
Right. Oh, do you remember any of your older siblings, like, kind of helping you learn how to farm and do the tasks,
Oh no,
or?
you just, it's just something that you were there, and I remember Mary, she worked just like Mom did, piling beets, topping beets, hoeing, just like all the kids did too as they grew up.
Right.
I remember the older kids like Chuck and Harry and all that were doing other things like they would have to uh, take the beets and pile them on the truck, throw them onto the truck, and the sacks of potatoes, they'd have to load them up on the trucks, and so on and so forth. So depending on how old you were, kind of dictated what chores you had to do, not chores, but what work you had to do.
Right.
I remember when we were kids, like grade school and a little older, we would have to be working, uh, hoeing weeds and things like that. Whatever you could do, at the age dictated what your job was.
Right. Now, was there a ringleader of sorts, or was it just delegated by what you were doing?
Yeah, you just did what you had to do.
Okay. So wait, I never really hear much about George, right?
Yeah, well, I don't really remember him too much because when we were growing up, I don't remember what age I was at when he finally left the family and he moved to Chicago. And I think it was basically an issue that he didn't like the farm, number one. Number two is I don't think he got along too well with Harry. And so he just took off.
Hmm. Now, what do you think that was? Was there anything that came up that made sense, or was it just you
I
were
was
too young to know, kind
too
of a
young
thing?
to know what's going on.
Right. Okay. And so, but once he moved, was there? I mean, did you ever hear from him again, or was it?
Very rarely. Very rarely. Probably the next thing I heard was after he passed away. And I think he had polio or something at that, and that's why he died. And I think it was probably Well, I remember that I think it was Chuck and a friend went to Chicago to pick up his body and brought it back to Scottsbluff. And I believe I was probably a junior or something like that, high school at the time.
Okay. And so then, was there different kind of groupings of kids in the family? Like, you know what I mean? Like waves of generations almost?
Yeah, it was nothing segmented or anything like that. You know, it was a gradual thing.
There was no big breaks,
No.
it doesn't seem.
No, and that I remember.
So in general at the time, so if he had polio, and people had, I don't know, was tuberculosis around
I
then?
think it was TB, as a matter of fact, now that you mention it, I think it was TB that he had.
And those were all things that pretty much we don't
Was,
deal with now.
yeah, that was, at the time, TB was prevalent, you know.
And so tell me about that. Like what does prevalent mean?
I think that was a common disease for a lot of people at that time.
And so what would a person do, say if you had tuberculosis? What then is
I
that?
don't know. I don't know.
And did people
I don't know whether they was,
do things differently or what?
No,
what did
I don't
they?
think so. I think that was just a disease that was prevalent at the time.
Right, but
And I don't know whether you took pills or what kind of drugs they had for it or whatever. I just don't know.
Does it feel like more people were debilitated from those things, from your polios and your
No,
and
I just think it was a fairly common disease
okay.
that people had.
Right. And so, tell me about your dad. I don't really hear much about your dad, really. It usually revolves around your mom.
Pardon?
It usually revolves around your mother.
No, I think, Dad was the farmer. And so all the kids were supposed to, be part of the working family. So he was a father just like any other father, I guess.
And what was he like? What was his personality like?
I don't really remember an awful lot, except I guess he was just like everybody else's father. You know, he
What was that
supposedly ran the family.
like? Was he vocal? Was he quiet? Was he assertive? Kind of what was his? How were his ways?
I don't think he was specifically assertive or anything else. I think I don't think he was very outspoken or anything else. I think after the kids grew up, like George and Harry and Mary, they because they were more integrated in the way of life of people who lived in the United States at that time. They kind of, the older kids in all the Japanese families at that time kind of integrated within the communities and all that. They did a lot of the interfacing and that kind of thing.
Right.
So, I think the
So
older
they kind of
folks,
bridged.
yeah, I think the older folks were kind of, uh, did not go out so much to interface with the community. I think that was up to the older kids because they were familiar with the situations and spoke English and all that. So I think that was just a normal thing that happened to all of those families back then.
And you would speak Japanese
At home,
too? Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah,
And were you fluent? I
No.
mean, were you?
no, just enough to get by
Right.
or, to interface.
Was there any, I don't know, was there any expression or stories from being in Japan, right? So they emigrated. Did they speak of their lives in Japan
Yeah,
at all?
very little. I don't remember anything of that at all. And I think that's probably because they were very young when they left. So I think it was just a normal situation that they didn't talk too much about what happened back there.
Right. So no expression of remorse, like, wow, we don't know, maybe
Well,
we should have stayed.
We were too
Or
young
maybe-
to, my generation of kids were probably too young. Even if there were some of that, it probably would have been more prevalent in the older kids, because it would have been more recent for them. But
Right.
as we grew up, being the younger generation, that was all kind of water under the bridge, so to speak.
Right. So what was their path? So they emigrated. I think they were.
Well, I think they
I think he came first, right? Or
What?
did they come out together, or did?
No. Dad came out first, and then he was kind of similar to like a war bride, so to speak, and then I don't know the details of how they made the arrangements and all that for her to come over, but she did that, and then I believe they were, I don't know, northwest part of the country at the time, and then a bunch of them moved to Nebraska to farm. But I believe some of the people were doing railroad work at the time, but I'm not totally familiar with all that.
Oh yeah, I think some of the stuff had like some of the census documents and whatnot that came up on the search thing. Had them kind of moving across maybe even Idaho or Utah
Yeah,
or something
yeah,
like
yeah.
that, Montana.
Yeah.
I mean, did they ever talk about that?
No, we were too young to probably wasn't even something that we thought about too much, It just, whatever happened,
So were they coming over on their own, or was there like a group?
Oh, I
You
think
know what
there
I
were
mean?
a number of them that came over, and they probably came over, in groups. The men probably first, and then they got the women. And I think as they were in the northwest part of the country, I think probably a bunch of them found out about moving to Nebraska because it was a rich community for farmers, And so, and I don't know what started all that, but there was a big community that ended up in Nebraska farming.
Mm-hmm. Do and did they stay together as a group, do you think?
Oh
Or
yes.
was it so
Oh,
that group that initially came over traveled across to easterly direction towards Nebraska ultimately?
yeah. Well, like I said, it was a big community. It's a big valley there, farming community, and so the people uh, probably came over initially and worked for somebody else, and then they gradually got enough money to get their own places, and so
Mm-hmm.
throughout the whole valley of Scottsbluff, Gearing, Alliance, Miniature, Lyman, that whole area was had different Japanese farmer families living in that community.
And is there I mean, was there friends of your father's that were part of that journey that
Oh yeah,
were
I'm sure. Yeah.
do you remember them and
No,
like their families?
I haven't. No, I was way too young for that.
Right. So there weren't like whatever pseudo uncles or people like that that were part of maybe that group.
And I have very little knowledge about who exactly came over. Obviously, we knew a lot of the families, we knew a lot of the parents and all that, but how that all transpired and all that.
Right. You didn't know whether they were part of that initial group.
Yeah.
Or... Now, was there a community in Scottsbluff that set up a beachhead of sorts that
Well,
like your folks got to or came to?
oh yeah, well, it was a community, so obviously they all got together, and they had, as you know, there was a community hall built in Scottsbluff that was used to kind of be the focal point for the whole community of Japanese people that were there.
When was that built?
Oh God, I
I mean, during your life or before?
I think it was right about in that time frame. I don't exactly remember when it was built.
Uh-huh. And so I'm just curious if like your folks were maybe the leading edge of people that immigrated there, or was there already a small community
I'm
that
sure
they
there was
were?
already a small community, and that somebody started this, and so gradually more and more people emigrated there. So, and I don't remember exactly when all that started, but it probably was in the 20s or about that time frame.
Right. Now, was there any, in terms of wider time scope? I mean, you were born after. Well, I mean, was the Dust Bowl and any of that
I don't.
in the picture at all, or was that just? I
I
mean, I
guess
know
that
that's.
happened. I guess that happened right around when I was born, so I don't have any remembrance of anything like that.
Did people ever refer to any of that, or depression, or
No,
no?
not to my knowledge. But we were way too young then, so
Right. I mean, your reality is your reality, and that's what's going on. But I'm just curious if people that were, your parents or older people referred to that as an event.
I don't remember that at all
Right.
because that happened right around when I was born. So
Right. Okay. And so, did that community more or less stay in that area, or did they kind of go there as a beachhead and disperse out? And
Well, they dispersed out to the area, but still in the same area. But they had different, you know, farms in different areas in that whole valley. Like Alliance, which is about 50 miles east of Scottsbluff. Initially, not very many people were there in Alliance, but gradually people spread out more and more. And so it kind of expanded east and west, both east and west. So, Mary's husband, family,
uh-huh.
they used to farm in the area around Scottsbluff, but they kind of drifted east, and so they moved. Their main area was in the Alliance area, which is where they are today.
Right. So the Nagakis and
Right.
that group. And was there, did Scottsbluff, was there train tracks that went through it, or
Oh,
a
yes.
highway, or
You know,
what?
there's a train that goes right through it. Pacific. What do they call it? Union Pacific was the main train line through there. So that was one of probably the main means of transportation, you know, to get in and out across the country through Scottsbluff.
I remember working in Grand Island, Nebraska, and
Right.
it was the busiest train junction in the United States
Well, I
for
think it's-
whatever reason.
It's a central part.
Yeah.
It's right about in the middle of the country.
So, did in terms of farming and your family's involvement, was it purely like, would you basically raise the crops and give them to a distributor, or how
Well, there
what
was
was
a-
your involvement with that?
Well, I don't remember too much except the main, one of the main products was sugar beets. So there was obviously a sugar bale factory right east of town there. So everybody had to take their beets there, and that's where they processed them. I guess they call that a sugar beet factory.
And are beets seasonal? Sorry, I don't know, but is
Yeah.
it
Oh,
like
yeah. It's like all the crops, you plant them in the spring, harvest them in the fall time.
mm-hmm.
Same with potatoes. Potatoes, you pick the potatoes, I think every farm had a cellar, big cellar, for the potatoes, where you had to keep underground, not underground, but in
Dark
a
and cool.
cool, dark place,
So was there, when you grew them and farmed these, was part of it getting them to the sugar beet factory?
Oh yeah, the sugar beet factory. Well, like I said, you took it to the factory, and that's where they ground them up for whatever they do with sugar beets. The other products like potatoes, you shipped about, beans, soybeans, and that kind of stuff, corn. They got sold, to buyers.
And did anybody work at? So you guys were purely farmers.
Right.
Did anybody work at the sugar beet factory?
No.
Or?
No, none of us. No.
And was there like a division of kind of communities within stuff where, like, farmers. There were, like cities can break up into, okay, these are the,
They were all farmers. Everybody was farming.
so the people who worked at the factory were farmers and the transpo people were farmers.
Well, yeah, no, like the sugar beet factory, obviously they had some workers, that was their job, full time, but everybody else in the community, in the whole area, their basic thing was farming,
Right.
other than the people that had specific jobs, like in the factory or commercial enterprises downtown, shops and so on and so on, just like any town would have.
So what was the perception of like farming? Was it something that you wanted to get out of as a kid, or you know what I mean? Like, was it like, oh man, I can't wait to get out of this and
No,
out of this
I don't
place?
think-
Or
I don't remember anything like that except, all we were cognizant of were we were growing up, went to school, and as you process through that, you know, uh, I think kids naturally think about what else are they going to do, education, join the service, do this, do that, whatever. It's just a normal process of growing up.
right. I mean, what I'm getting at is was service seen as, or things like that. Sorry, let me do this because I think he went to sleep here. I'm gonna do this. That's a half an hour.